Gotcha.
Best friends, pen pals, all that.
Yeah, we are. I mean, we hang out, you know. We're
Yeah,
cool.
you
We're
count
cool.
your money together.
Yeah, that's what it is. That'd be a short meeting, I promise you. What's going on, guys? Oh, Jared, what's up, dude? We are live. We are live. It looks like everything's going good on this end. Zach, you do like you normally do and let me know. I don't know where Gary's at. Gary, if you watch this later, what's up, man? We were thinking about you, talking about you. Nothing that we wouldn't say to your face, though. No, that doesn't mean it's all nice. Trust me. No, it's cool, man. Glad to be back. Kind of getting back into a regular groove a little bit here. We've had vacations and we've had time off and we've had all this other stuff going on. But I'm happy. I'm happy that we're kind of getting into a groove now. I'm also happy to have my T5 back on the road. Finally got the clutch pedal fixed on that yesterday. So back in action with the T5. So look out for a silver turbo Volvo lurking in a neighborhood near you. So actually I thought about Gary when I was putting this one together because we were talking about last week how some of these lessons get a little in the weeds, you know. I mean, that's safe to say. Some of them are more complex than others, and that's just the way it goes. And he said that he really liked the kind of simpler subjects a little bit better. And I've had good response. Last week, actually, thank you guys out there online. I think was our most viewed class that I've ever had. So shout out to Rich Hervig and Jerry Hoffman and Peter Florence and David Younger and all you guys, John Oakes, all you guys that share this every single week. You're not even in the same state. You're not even in the same city. But you guys share it and people see it. Ryan O'Donnell, man, you know, you're going to be watching this in Boston soon. So that'd be super cool. We got the East Coast locked down. But no, I do appreciate it. And like I said, you know, talking to him about, you know, the simpler subjects being a little bit, you know, what more his speed and what he liked. That's kind of what we got going on today. Now, there's plenty of technical stuff in here, you know, that I'm sure going to talk way too fast in that may go over somebody's head, but that's fine. Zach's monitoring the Facebook feed, so definitely let me know that you're watching. You know, any questions, comments, whatever. You know, he'll get them to me in real time. We haven't had any TV failure yet. I know. I've run through the entire presentation twice before we went on camera without a failure. So I'm not touching anything. Yeah, we're just gonna see how this goes. But let's go ahead and pray and get this thing kicked off. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again. I always thank you for this time we get to spend together, but Father, I do mean it. I appreciate every single person here and every single person that may see this. Father, just help it to bring closer to you. That's the ultimate goal here, Father. We just do this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, cool deal. Well, I titled this one, Keeping Cool. Now, you know, Zach and I had talked a little bit about these classes and whatnot, and the last one that we did was kind of a rehash of a one that I did during Corona Madness, when we were only doing online and nobody was watching and I was doing it in my living room and that kind of stuff. This is another one of those. This is one that I wrote during the whole Rona thing, and again, I don't know how many people saw it, but kind of did a little rehash on it and figured I'd go back and do it when we got a better audience. So I think that's going to work out good. This picture was taken many years ago. Shout out Hank Ramsey. Of course, that's my Datsun. Brad in the BMW, John Williams in the Volvo down there, and Brad's wife Jenny down there in the Miata, which eventually, yep, that's the original Grip Syndicate at one of our first autocrosses together, actually. And as far as I know, my sister has the Miata, John still has the R, I think Brad still has the Beamer. I just recently sold the Z to Dr. John, and Hank, I think, still has the RX-7. So this was like 13 or 14 years ago.
You're the only one who doesn't still have a program.
I know. But if oh yeah, the Miata got sold too. So my sister bought it from Jenny, and then she recently sold it not long ago. But we all held on to those cars for a very long time. So I think John's is probably the only one that's in the same exact condition it was 15 years ago. So shout out John Williams, you know, safer. All right, let's get this thing kicked off. So our first.
That's for BMW driver. Huh?
Yeah, right. Our first tie-in. That's right. I didn't even make it 30 seconds in. I knew there was this one. You guys got to, you know, I can take the jokes just like anyone else. Everybody knows that I love BMWs. I think they do a lot of things really really Cooling system is not one of them, however.
My thing is burning oil, having no power.
Yeah. I'm just going to say.
This,
like
okay?
I said, you know I love my Euro cars, but man, Beamer and their cooling system, you can fix it. Ask Zach. He's got it nailed down. The only not overheating 36, you know, in the county. It takes a lot of work and a lot of money, but you can fix the BMW out of it. But this one, we're talking about we're talking about cooling system. Yeah, basically take everything in the cooling system and replace it with race parts. But we're talking about cooling system today. That's why I titled this one Keeping Cool. And I've got 3 main points. And the first one is don't overheat. So that's basically, what is overheating? Okay? I mean, overheating is relative, right? It can be really hot, but not overheating. You know, one thing can operate at a certain temperature and be fine. Another thing, that same temperature would be detrimental. As we talked about in this class a whole bunch of times, engines, transmissions, differentials, manual gearboxes, computer systems, anything on the car, heat is the enemy. Heat is the number one enemy. I mean, charging system, batteries, starters, everything. Heat is what we're trying to battle. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the cooling system for the engine in particular, but just keep that in mind that we're always trying to control heat in whatever system it is that we're working on. So what do we mean by don't overheat? Well, our tie-in for that is be slow to anger, right? You've heard of a heated argument, I'm sure, or probably had some, or 17 today. James 1:19-20. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Now, I'm not a pastor, never been a pastor, plan on being one, but I guarantee you at some point they probably write a sermon and like, man, I really needed that, you know? Like they wrote the sermon for themselves. This is one of those situations for me, for sure. Not so much now, but man, when I was younger, this was a major problem. It's only kind of a problem now. One thing I do like is that I don't know of anywhere else in the Bible, and again, not a theologian, I could be wrong, that it says, take note of this. Period. Cut off. Like, listen to this. You know, I just thought that was very interesting. This is the NIV translation too. Who knows what it says in King James? You know, hear ye of this or something maybe. But this is very, very, very sound advice. I mean, I know that we use a lot of Bible verses in here, and all of them are very sound advice, no question. But this is excellent advice. Be slow to speak, slow to become angry. And my favorite one is verse 20. Human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. I myself have become very, very angry and done things in anger. And at no point was I done doing that and going, man, I think God really approved of that. Yeah, what was I thinking? There's always like regret and like, oh my God, now I got to pay for that window, or, you know, whatever the case is.
Now I got to court on Monday.
Yeah. Sam likes to tease me, you know, I lost my temper with a Ford Ranger one time, put an AC system in it, couldn't get the lines apart, they were rusted and crusted and froze together and all that. And I lost my temper and punched a dent in the side of the truck. Then, walk away from it, come back to it, the thing falls together. And I spend more time fixing the dent than I did on the original job to start with. So there's a little confession time for you. So I ended up spending more time fixing the thing that I messed up by being angry than I did what I was trying to do to start with. So that's an excellent real world example. But I'm sure that everybody's probably got that thing out there, and I really like that. It does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So, when we're talking about heat, what are we talking about? We're talking about thermal efficiency. This is your nerd alert for tonight. But it can be defined as the amount of heat energy used for doing work compared to the amount of heat energy actually created or poured into it. Or in other words, the percentage of heat energy converted to useful power. I'm going to stop right there for just a second. All we're doing with any internal combustion engine is we are using a fuel source to create energy to use to do work. In our case, that energy is heat energy for the most part, because you know the expansion inside the cylinder is what pushes down on the connecting rod, rotates the crankshaft, and moves the wheels, and we need that expansion, so we need heat. A very, very small percentage of that is actually transformed into useful work, and we're going to see that in just a minute. You'd be surprised how much thermal capacity gasoline or diesel, internal combustion engines, the fuel that we use, has enormous energy stored in it. But we don't do a very, very good job at all of actually using that, and you're going to see in just a minute. So most modern gasoline engines are only 20 to 35% thermally efficient, leaving quite a lot of heat energy lost into the exhaust and the cooling systems. So that right there is what I was talking about. You take 100% of the energy available in that fuel, and we're only using 20 to 35% of it to actually make power. Turbocharging, if properly used, can regain some of the energy lost to the exhaust, Mazda and Toyota are working to increase thermal efficiency to over 50%. They haven't released it yet, but Toyota has got an engine that's touching that, and Mazda is working really hard on it. Just to give you an idea of what 50% thermal efficiency would mean, as of 2018, the Mercedes Formula One engine was said to have the highest thermal efficiency of any petrol engine or gasoline engine at just over 50%. It is rumored to make 700 to 950 horsepower from 1.6 liters.
So if my engine
It was 50% thermally efficient.
I would need the turbo 3 stages to
And
make my 200 horsepower.
the reason I included that is because when you think about it, you're like, oh, Mazda and Toyota are working to achieve over 50%. You're like, wow, 50%. Like, is that a lot? Well, 700 to 900 horsepower from 1.6 liters, I would say, is a lot. And it's said to have been the most thermally efficient gasoline engine ever, and it still just barely cracked 50%. And this is back in 18, of course, but still, Formula One is the pinnacle of automotive engineering, as anyone knows or should know. All you guys go watch Formula One. I'm just saying. But yeah, I just thought that was a really, really interesting fact. And like I said, most of that. Yeah, they're real thermally efficient. Actually, they do some amazing things with those engines in NASCARs. I'm not going to lie. For the guys that didn't hear him on camera, he said NASCAR, baby. And that's fine. If you're into it, that's cool. The engine builders, shout out to the engine builders in Mooresville and Charlotte and everywhere in North Carolina, man. Those guys, even if you don't like the racing, you got to respect the engine builders, They stand wide open, red line for 2 hours at a time.
200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Like for 4 hours.
Like I said, even if you're not into it, man, the guys that build those engines, they know what they're doing, no question. All right, so where does this heat go? This is our biggest thing right here. So typical energy split in a gasoline combustion engine. 25%, like we said, is actually being used for power. That's actually what's powering the car, making power. We're losing a little bit to friction and parasitic losses. Again, that's reduced a lot with dual overhead cams, and they have special coatings and special bearings and modern oils, and all of these things have really cut down on that a lot. Older engines were way, way, way worse than this, especially pushrod engines.
But that old Ford engine was quad overhead cam to try and deal with that?
That actually went to like what we were talking about with the dual overhead cam in one of our other classes. They wanted to be able to use 2 intake valves and 2 exhaust valves. And the only practical way to do that is have a cam for each one. So that's why I ended up with 4. Some manufacturers have gotten tricky with like running 2 valves on 1 follower and that kind of thing, but it's not common. But they wanted to have 2 smaller intake valves and 2 smaller exhaust valves because overall flow is better than 1 big valve and 1 big valve. So they're trying to keep velocities up while still having flow on the top end. But yeah, we're losing some to friction. Again, this is where your oil and your coatings and your bearings and your clearances and all that stuff come in. 30% of that is being lost into the cooling system, actually into the coolant itself. And then about 40% is being lost out the exhaust. This is where turbocharging really, really shines. What drives the turbine on a turbocharger? The energy in the exhaust, the heat energy coming out of the exhaust. I know in simple terms, it's just blowing over the turbine, but in I guess physics terms, it's actually the heat. It's the heat energy. That's right. And so we're capturing as much of that heat energy as we can to actually spin the turbine to make boost and make power. But what we're talking about tonight is the cooling system. So think about that. 25% is being used to move the car. Almost the same or a little more of that is being dumped into the cooling system. It's being dumped right into the coolant. Now, they say coolant in this particular graph. I would say coolant and oil, because oil plays a big role in cooling the engine as well. And we can talk about that. There's oil coolers, and oil obviously is transferring heat off of all the internal components. But ultimately, all the heat that the oil pulls out of the engine is being transferred into the coolant as well, because the oil is just kind of the medium, to do that.
No, the oil just burns to get rid of it.
in your case, it does. Yeah, his is 105% thermally efficient, because 5% is the oil being burned out the exhaust to cool the exhaust manifold. All right, you guys with me so far? I hope so. So what does a typical cooling system look like? I know this is kind of an ancient looking engine. It kind of looks like an old Ford 2.3 actually. Yeah, it's got a time belt and overhead cam, so yeah, it's got to be like got to be an old 2.3, I'm sure.
I wouldn't want it in any of my stuff.
But when we're talking about cooling system, what are we talking? Obviously, the radiator is probably the biggest piece that most people would recognize. That's a major component. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But there are some other things involved as well. We've got the expansion tank. We've got hoses. Obviously, we've got to move that coolant around somehow. We've got a pump of some kind. In this case, I don't know where the pump is. Usually driven by the timing belt somewhere up here, maybe belt driven in this particular case. But we've got to have a pump of some kind to move the coolant. And then we've got these jackets, these water jackets inside the block. You kind of see these hollow areas here. It's kind of tough to tell. I don't know if that shows up on screen very well or not. But you see a piston, you see the cylinder wall, and then you see this kind of hollow area. And piston, wall, piston wall, and then hollow area. Those are water jackets. There's actually coolant flowing around these cylinder walls all the time. And the same thing in the cylinder head. We've got water jackets that are flowing inside the casting of the head and moving around, yes.
So the coolant system works through thermal diffusion?
It would be, what would be thermal, what is it called when the radiator, heat exchanger. Yeah, what is it called when heat is exchanged? I don't know what that's, when you take a hot piece of metal, you pour coolant on it, and it absorbs the heat out of the metal, like the transfer.
Heat, like, diffuses through.
Yeah, so maybe it is diffusion. Maybe I'm not familiar with that term. But yeah, that's what it's doing.
Sorry, physics is,
What it's doing is actually, yes, the heat is being transferred into the coolant, the median.
through the metal.
And then that is then pumped to a heat exchanger, and then that heat is exchanged to the outside air, where it cools back off and is pumped back into the engine, and the whole cycle starts all over again. This is why it's very important to use coolant in most cases. Now, I know that there's some,
Water.
well, there are some race car applications where you have to use just water, but even then they have some chemicals and stuff. Distilled water, if you are just using water, electrolysis becomes a big problem if you're not using distilled water. The minerals and stuff inside there can contribute to electrolysis and corrosion. These are either iron blocks or aluminum blocks, neither of which play nice with water. But yeah, in most all cases, anything that we're going to be talking about, you want to use coolant, because not only does coolant lubricate components like in the water pump and whatnot, but it also has heat transfer capabilities that help it transfer heat better than just water by itself. I know the old wives' tale is, oh, well, antifreeze is just there so it don't freeze. No, that is why we call it coolant, and because it doesn't freeze, but it also lubricates components, prevents corrosion, prevents electrolysis, and has properties that help it absorb heat and transfer heat faster. But yeah, this is just kind of a quick rundown of the cooling system. We got the heater core over here. We're not going to talk much about that tonight. I just wanted to include that for a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about. So the purpose of coolant, which I just ran through, actually, I forgot this slide was next. Removal of heat from engine and transfer to the heat exchangers or radiator. Maintain optimum engine temperature, 195 to 220 degrees for gasoline engines in general. Prevent boiling or freezing by use of chemical additives such as ethylene glycol. That's the stuff that'll kill you if you drink it. Prevent corrosion caused by electrolysis and oxidation, and lubricate the cooling system components. So we don't really need to spend a whole lot of time on that because I just said all that. And we're going to get into the different types of coolant a little bit. I know that in this picture we're pouring this green stuff in here, and it doesn't look like it's been diluted at all. But it looks like it's a Jeep 4-liter, so it won't matter. It's all going to run out soon anyway. Yeah, exactly. That's probably why it's not diluted. All right, so the three main types of antifreeze used are IAT, OAT, and HOAT. IAT is inorganic acid technology, and that's the traditional green stuff that you see. It uses silicate and phosphates as corrosion inhibitors, and the expected life is about 2 years or 30,000 miles, which nobody adheres to, unfortunately. OAT, organic acid technology, this was the first long-life coolant. This is the Dex Cool. This is the devil's coolant right here, and you're going to see some really, really bad stuff when you see these two mixed together. The old orange GM stuff, they were the first ones to use it that I'm aware of. I don't know if anyone else was using it back then, but this stuff is terrible. This is a cooling system killer, but usually it's because of contamination and not changing it. When this stuff was brand new, everybody said it was long life. You didn't have to change it at all. It was good for the life of the car. Yeah, about 70, 80,000 miles in, we started seeing sludge this thick built up in the bottom of radiators. And the radiator caps and the expansion bottles and the heater cores and everything was all stopped up with this terrible sludge. Dexcool, they really kind of missed the mark with that, but they've gotten better over the years. This was on the old early cars. So Dexcool is an OAT based antifreeze, but not all OAT antifreeze is Dexcool. OAT antifreeze is not compatible with IAT and will create mud consistency in your cooling system. This is where it's very important. Do not mix these two. The green, in this case, the orange, although not all OAT stuff is orange. They got all different colors, man. They got blue, they got red, pink, purple. I've seen every kind of color of coolant you could think of. But yeah, the important thing to remember is do not mix them together. They started it because of aluminum. 1994, they were coming out with a lot more aluminum cylinder heads, aluminum water pumps, aluminum timing covers. There was a lot more aluminum being used in these cars, and they needed a coolant that was going to protect that aluminum better. Yeah, they kind of missed the mark. But HOAT is hybrid organic acid, much like OAT. This is a coolant, a long life coolant. That's what LLC stands for, with a service interval of 5 years or 150,000 miles. And HOAT has an additive package that allows it to be compatible with other antifreeze types. This is the stuff you see like Universal. You see, mixes with any color, that kind of stuff. Sell it at O'Reilly all the time. That's what this HOAT is. You also see this with like diesels and stuff as well. They're really, really important with what kind of coolant you put in there, and I'm not really sure why. I don't know what about a diesel engine makes the coolant so specific. I don't know if it's because they need to try and keep as much heat as they can in the combustion chamber. That's one problem with diesels, is getting them up the temperature. They take forever to get up the temperature, and a cold cylinder in a diesel that doesn't run good, so
starting a diesel in like Alaska.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's they're trying. That's right. So I think that's why diesels use specific coolant, is to try and maintain some of that combustion chamber temperature. If you guys out there know, let me know, but I think that's what they're doing. But either way, the HOAT stuff is the stuff that you can mix with any color. So again, never, ever, ever mix Dexcool with anything. This is usually what happens. The car's 10 years old. It's had 5 water pumps and 4 thermostats and a bunch of heater cores put in it. And somebody just went down to O'Reilly and said, oh, my 72 GMC used green coolant, so this thing must be fine too, and dumped it in there. And then you end up with mud that you will never get out of the block and out of the cylinder head and everything else. So very, very important. Don't. No, because the engine will still run fine, but you'll spend lots and lots of time, lots and lots of money trying to clean the coolant system out. You just have to keep flushing it and keep flushing it, and I've got a picture of it later on. You'll see what I mean about how hard it is to get out. There it is right there. So this is the typical tag you would see on a GM, Pontiac, GM, Buick, Chevrolet, Cadillac, any of the old GM stuff. You would see this: use Dexcool coolant only. Your coolant does not require maintenance for 5 years or 100,000 miles. Only add silica-free, orange, blah, 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 so on. Yeah, a lot of us see these kind of tags. BMW, Audi, Volkswagen, Toyota, Honda, they've all got their own little tag that says use this fluid only, and you kind of like, yeah, whatever, you're just trying to sell me coolant. This is not true. This is very important because this is what happens when you don't. This is what happens when antifreeze, or the green type and the IAT and the OAT mix together. It makes this mud, sludge type stuff. What that is, I have no idea. It's some kind of silica oxidation. I don't know what it's made from, but it is almost impossible to get out of a cooling system. You can flush it and keep flushing, replace the radiator, replace the heater core, replace the hoses, replace the water pump, but it's still going to be in the block, it's still going to be in the head, it's still going to be in the expansion tank. So yeah, that's really bad news.
Did you just open one end of the cooling system and just run water through it?
You can, but when you could rinse this off in a hose, the stuff don't come off. It's extremely dense and sticky. It stays on whatever it's on.
You need high pressure water.
Yeah, that's it.
Or something slightly corrosive.
There may be a chemical out there that gets it off that I'm not aware of, but man, my experience, you just got to flush it until you do the best you can and send it on its way. But the major problem here, obviously, it looks gross. That's a problem. But what did we just talk about? What is the coolant doing? It's up against the cylinder walls. It's up against the cylinder head, and it is absorbing heat from that material into the coolant to be transferred to the heat exchanger. Well, if that cylinder wall is coated in this, and the new coolant or the new water or whatever is up against that, how much heat do you think is being transferred? It's almost like an insulator at that point. And if it's in your radiator, how much transfer is it doing? That's the problem when coolant gets this way. even if the flow was unaffected, even if it flowed just fine, which it usually isn't, the heat exchange, you've compromised the ability for it to exchange heat at this point. So very, very important. You don't see a whole lot of these on the road anymore. I mean, if you got a 94 Pontiac, just let it die, man. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Just let it die. But if you happen to run into an old GM that uses Dexcool, very, very specific. We want to make sure we keep using that.
With diesel, diesel's not worried about how fast they're going. They're worried about the torque. That's why they're keeping the heat into the engine.
And it very well could be. Could have something to do with RPM. They definitely don't rev as high.
Trucks, they top out less than 2,000.
Yeah, I mean, I drove tow trucks for a while, man, and if that sucker turned 2,800, it sounded like it was the end of the world, So
until it's a runaway diesel, then it's like, I'm going to be an F1 car.
Right. A lot of it has to do with the rotating assembly as well, though. I mean, you take a big diesel, the piston has to be so robust to handle that kind of compression. The connecting rod has to be so robust to handle that kind of torque. The crankshaft has to be so robust. So all these components are now really, really heavy, and nothing kills it faster than something really heavy spinning really fast, right? So that's usually what keeps the RPMs down too. Now, if you were some kind of machinist and you wanted to build a diesel that turned to like 12,000 RPM, that would be pretty cool.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere near it when you was running. But.
I mean, Audi did those TDI Le Mans cars for a long time. They were diesel, and they sounded like any other race car. So I don't know what those things were turning, but I bet it was a lot.
Do you know how to work on diesel?
Know how and want to are two very different things. Yeah, no, I know plenty, but no, I do not want to. So this is a really cool chart. I only included this on here. Holler at me if you guys want to print out of this or whatever. I can get it to you. This is really cool. Xerox is one of the leading manufacturers of coolant. And if you have like a BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Volvo, Honda, Toyota, anything, diesel again, anything that uses a special kind of coolant, they make one for it. And this is a really cool chart that they use, kind of breaking down the years and what that vehicle used. So you can see like right here, Toyota Lexus Scion has been using red coolant forever. You can't read it down here at the bottom, but that's Hyundai, Honda, blue, you know, down here. G48, if you own a BMW, yeah, you're very familiar with going to O'Reilly and asking for a bottle of G48. And then the G90, the purple stuff, that's the Audi, Porsche, Volkswagen stuff that they're using now. But I just wanted to include this to show you that every manufacturer kind of has their own specification. I would highly suggest you stick with that specification. I don't know of anything that's causing the Dexcool problems like they did, 30 years ago. But I wouldn't be willing to risk it, honestly. Just buy the coolant that is correct for your vehicle, or you can use the HOAT universal type stuff, which may not be ideal, but it's certainly better than having mud in your system. Speaking of O'Reilly, shout out to Lexi. She's not with us tonight. So store 2451, what's up? If you guys are watching this at the store or happen to watch it later, let me know. But what's going on, girl? We miss you. We'll see you soon. All right.
I want to go back. That made me sad seeing Saab just turn white.
Yep. No, blanked out. No, we don't know what it uses. The Fiat one is funny. They were like, we don't know what it uses, and then it goes to G90. I don't know. Yeah.
They went bust like 8 times, but they went bust for good.
GM owned Saab, and I think they killed them off around the same time they killed Pontiac and Saturn and all of those. Doesn't matter. It's the same car underneath as all the rest of their cars. So what do we do? Our next tie-in, maintaining our cool. So first we talked about not overheating. Well, we need to maintain our cool. I'm talking a little extra fast today. I'm actually ahead of myself. Zach, any questions, comments coming through online? Anybody watching? Anybody saying what's up? Hope you guys are out there watching. Like I said, definitely hit me up. I say it every time at the end of the class, but I do watch each and every one of these afterwards, and I do see the comments and questions that come throughout the week. Shout out Jerry Hoffman, man. That was awesome. I really appreciate that. Rich Hervig, again, I really appreciate your comments as well. But maintaining our cool. So let go of the bad. So this is a really cool example. Bad, good.
Mountain Dew it was good.
Yeah, see a difference any there? This is an actual real life example of a customer that needed a coolant flush, and you can see this stuff doesn't last forever. It is like any other fluid. It breaks down with time. It breaks down with exposure to oxygen. It breaks down with heat. It breaks down with stuff that gets poured in it. Contamination. It burns in a cylinder like a blown head gasket, and it smells terrible. You ever see a car blowing a bunch of white smoke and you can smell it. It's a very distinct smell.
Gary said something about he said, "Hey, sorry I couldn't be there tonight."
Oh, awesome! Thank you, man. Thank you, Gary. Fantastic, awesome, guys. Appreciate you. Again, if I'm back up on the big screen in the Hervik house, then look out behind you again. No, I'm joking. One of those times I'm going to do that, and there's going to be somebody behind you, though. Yeah, it will. I don't know that you could like light it on fire, but it will burn in the combustion chamber, and it smells terrible.
Maybe it's more like the steam.
Yeah, I was going to say, it may not be burning, like you said. It might just be the steam or the pressure and the heat doing whatever it does to it, but it's bad.
Owners vapes that offset the bad smell.
And yeah, I was going to say, anything's flammable with enough heat, right? It's really bad on your windshield. When you have a radiator hose pop off and it soaks your windshield in coolant, it's really hard to get off. You can't see anything out of it. Not that I would know.
No, of course not.
So let go of the bad. So this is letting go of the bad and in with the good here. Colossians 3:7-8. You used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Again, talking to myself here. This one was really good. This one I read and I was like, I've got to use this. It fits so perfectly. It works out good, out with the bad, in with the good. So you used to walk in these ways. You must rid yourselves of these things, right? That works out really well. But anger, rage, malice, and slander, those all kind of sound like the same thing, right? But I guess
different levels.
Yeah, I guess they're not. I don't know if I've ever done anything with malice. Maybe, but anger and rage, definitely, they kind of go hand in hand. Yeah, exactly. I've had several of those stories in my career, trust me. And the filthy language from your lips, this is one that I've tried to do a better job with. I joke all the time that mechanics taught sailors how to curse. They learned it from the people working on the boats that they were sailing on. Yeah, mechanics not exactly, the best place to pick up your vocabulary, but I've been doing a much better job than I used to. I don't know what it is about, cutting your hand and knuckles under a sharp, hot Chrysler 200 intake, reaching for a bolt you can't see. That just kind of brings it out in you. Yeah. But it does. So, yeah, picture like stubbing your toe or something and then doing it like 40 times a day, every day, repeatedly. But now trying to do a better job. And again, it's right here. It's black and white. I mean, it is what it is. Even if you don't live by it, you can't argue with it, right? It's right there. But this is what we're talking about. We're talking about out with the bad and in with the good. Yeah, boy, that would fill up fast. So we talked about coolant. We talked about thermal efficiency. Now we need to talk about how do we move this coolant, right? It's got to move somehow. And the one thing I didn't include in here was actually the BMW electric pump, which is
that's convenient.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about that. Don't worry about it. It's because it's the ideal pump, and it never fails. So I didn't have a picture of a broken one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I probably couldn't find one because nobody could find me a new one because they've all been used.
There's no comparison. They're all broken.
And it's funny because honestly, it is a great design. Granted, they do have their failures, don't get me wrong, but the idea of being able to move coolant through the engine when the engine's not running or when the engine's at low speed, is fantastic. It actually does work great when it works. They do have failures. They are expensive, but, that's the way it goes. But we need to move this coolant. We need to pump it somehow. Generally, we're talking about a crank pulley driven pump, like driven right off of a serpentine belt or a V-belt in an old car. But what we've moved to nowadays is the internally driven one, either driven by the timing belt, timing chain, or something of that nature. We've actually moved them inside and driven them with the timing components. There's a couple of reasons for that. In general, the timing components tend to be more robust. Yes, we do have timing chain failures, and yes, we do have timing belt failures, but they're much less likely to fail than a serpentine belt sticking out in the open, exposed to the elements, hooked to the AC compressor, hooked to the power steering pump, hooked to everything else on the front of the motor. Timing components tend to be a lot more robust. Also, by moving the water pump inside the timing cover, we've made the engine more compact. And obviously, we've talked about this a million times, but packaging is a huge deal on a modern car. Either we're trying to get as much engine as we can in a very small space, which is awesome, or we're trying to move the passenger compartment and everything as far forward as we can. We're trying to move the suspension components and everything as far in as we can. Aerodynamic reasons, passenger space reasons, all those things factor into the way that they package these engines. So by moving the water pump inside the timing cover, they're able to package the engine just a little bit smaller. Coolant pumps come in many shapes and sizes and drive styles. They can be belt driven, timing gear driven, or chain driven, and even electric. So I did mention the BMW one just a little bit. Right here, I got a pretty neat cutaway. They're fairly simple devices. There's an impeller of some type. That impeller can be shaped in many different ways, but they're all trying to achieve the same thing, moving coolant. We've got a hub, whether that's serpentine belt driven, timing belt driven, timing chain driven, gear driven, whatever the case. We need some way to turn this thing. We've got a bearing assembly, we've got a seal, and this turns the impeller. The impeller has passages on the inside, and it moves the coolant where it needs to go. Typical failures, this bearing and seal. We're going to get to a couple of impeller failures in a little bit, so those aren't as common, but they do happen. Usually what fails, though, is the improper coolant, overheating, over temperature, contamination. For some reason, just wear and tear, cheap parts, which also plays a major role. But for some reason, this bearing will fail. And it will create a situation where this shaft rocks, or it creates a space. And now that seal fails, and then coolant is allowed to leak out. This is actually, believe it or not, it's coolant lubricated. There's no oil or anything in there. This is why we were talking about what's really important when it comes to coolant types, because this thing is spinning at engine RPM for, God knows how many thousands of miles. Yes?
I think they'll find another way to spin something instead of using a bearing. Because even taking a fidget spinner and you spinning that thing 100 times, them bearings are going to come loose.
That's right. That's right. And that's where materials, design, manufacture, all of that, that's where quality components really, really make a difference. Like you said, you can have a cheap bearing, you can spin it 100 times, and it can heat up, it can rattle, it starts getting loose. Well, the same thing's happening here. And so now we've got, engine temperature, all of that. We've got the belt pulling on the side of this, because this is another one of those places where you don't want to over tension the belt, because any extra tension you put on that belt is actually applying a side load to the shaft, so you can actually increase the wear on this. So this is typically where you see a failure at. Again, there's a weep hole on most water pumps, and usually the telltale sign is it's leaking coolant out of the weep hole. You know that this has failed. It's time to replace it. But that weep hole is actually there because a very tiny amount of coolant is designed to actually get on this bearing and lubricate the shaft. So a very tiny amount of excess coolant will sometimes drip out of that weep hole, or you might see the little telltale kind of white drips or whatever on the side of it. That's not a huge deal. If it's pouring out of it, obviously it's failed. But they're typically there because they are coolant lubricated. So again, very important reason why you need to keep that coolant up to date. Cavitation is the unseen pump killer. Now this is where you get impeller failures. So cavitation can be described as the formation of tiny bubbles, superheated vapor in the cooling system. These bubbles create pressure differences that can be extremely damaging to metal and plastic parts in the cooling system. And yes, there are a lot of plastic parts in the cooling system. Now,
metal and plastic parts, I feel like that's everything in the car.
Yeah, I mean, honestly. And there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of great reasons to use plastic parts. It's thermally stable, it's extremely rigid, you can manufacture it in any shape, you don't have to machine it into some kind of shape. So actually, with really high quality materials, plastic is great.
Like plastic blocks.
You can't count on auto manufacturers to use the highest quality materials all the time, however. And in their defense, most of these manufacturers, actually all of them, I don't think any manufacturer manufactures these kind of components. They're all bought from some giant manufacturer that makes these kind of things, and they sell them to the manufacturers, and they get put on the car and sold to you. So it's not like Chevrolet has got a, water pump casting plant somewhere that they're making these things. I don't think.
Not like Ferrari.
Yeah, they're not building them one at a time. Yeah, exactly. So they're all bought from suppliers, and then those suppliers are, farming that out to other suppliers and so on and so forth. So,
Chevy makes
yeah.
more cars in a month than Ferrari makes in a year.
Oh yeah, easy
Probably more
by a long shot. Yeah, 100%. I toured the Ford truck plant years and years ago, and I think back then they were building like 400,000 F-150s a year. So I think that's even more than that now.
They sell all of them. That's the
Yeah, and they sell all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't make
And that's just one manufacturer with one particular model. And every manufacturer's got a whole bunch of models, and they're building cars at a rate that's unbelievable. Yeah. I don't know what's happening to all the planet or whatever. But anyway, that's another story. Yeah, 2.5 million cars a year being dug out of the ground. Anybody that's got a boat is probably familiar with cavitation. Cavitation can occur on boat props as well. This is a major problem with propellers on boats, or anything that's spinning at a high rate in a fluid is susceptible to cavitation. And really what it's doing, I'm going to try to describe this the simplest way I know how. So picture you had like something spinning in water, all right? In this case, an impeller. It's spinning in water. And it starts spinning so fast that the water separates from the impeller or propeller in a boat's case. Well, that separation creates a bubble. Well, that bubble is a low pressure area. So not only is it dragging on the impeller, but it's actually pulling material from the impeller. So you spin it faster and faster and faster, and these little bubbles are happening, constantly at a super high rate, and in this case at a super high temperature. And so now it's actually pulling material from the impeller. And it doesn't sound like a bubble would be all that detrimental, but at really high RPM for a long period of time, cavitation, I mean, if you've ever seen a boat prop that's been all eaten to pieces and stuff, cavitation can be extremely detrimental. Well, the same thing can happen in your cooling system. In this case, the impeller eroded to nothing. It literally is now just a disc. And in this one, you can see the metal being eroded. You can actually see the pits, where it's pulled the material from the inside of the pump. Yeah, it was like that. Tauruses used to be good for this. The impeller would just flatten out like a disc. I mean, it would be nothing left there.
It's crazy how much damage a pressure difference can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. It's almost like, and I don't know the physics behind this, but when something goes like supersonic, like if you swung something around or spun something around really, really fast and it gets to a certain speed where it starts pulling itself apart, it's kind of the same idea. It's the pressure difference.
It's because the object is moving the air, and the air doesn't snap back into place behind.
Yeah.
There's a vacuum behind.
That's exactly what's happening here, except it's in a liquid.
And that's why the faster you go, the harder it is to go faster.
That's right.
Plus, air resistance, but
so lower than normal coolant pressure restrictions in the cooling system, highly degraded coolant, and low coolant levels can all contribute to cavitation. This is an important one because back in I was about to say back in my day. I'm going to avoid that. Back in my day, you go down to the river and get you a bucket and pour it in there. No, but you had a coolant leak, and actually I'm guilty of this. I actually lost a car to this. You had a little bit of a coolant leak. You couldn't afford to fix it. So what do? You uncap the radiator halfway so it didn't build pressure. So it didn't leak out. If it didn't build pressure, it don't leak out. We're winning. But lower than normal coolant pressure is not a good idea. This is also another reason where the BMW, Audi, Volkswagen crowd, where they really, their cooling systems kind of let go, is because they run extremely high coolant pressures. But you're seeing this now in all manner of cars. All the GM Ecotec stuff, the Ford EcoBoost, the 2.3s and 3.5s, 3.7s, all that stuff. Everything that is a high-powered, low displacement deal, you're seeing this in. You're seeing really high cooling system pressures. And I said high-powered, not just low capacity. Coolant concentration contribute to cavitation as well. Coolant mixes above 50%. Can change the specific gravity enough to create added heat, promoting cavitation. So this is why it's also important that you don't just pour straight coolant. It needs to be mixed. Preferably, it needs to be mixed with distilled water, not tap water, but yes, I'm as guilty as anyone of putting water hose water in my coolant and dumping it in the car. However, this is a do what I say, not as I do kind of moment. You preferably want to use distilled water, or just buy like the Xerox, like we showed earlier, that's already 50-50 mixed from the shelf. You just buy it, you pour it in. You know, that's ideal. But really, I guess you could call rich mixtures, or mixtures over 50%. The coolant is, I don't know if you ever had it on you. It's sticky and it's kind of thick. I mean, it pours like water, but it doesn't feel like water.
It's like corn syrup.
Yeah, it's not quite as sticky as that, but it is right sticky.
Yeah, it's like you look at it, it doesn't look sticky, and then it gets on you. And just
I hate it on me, but
Can't even wipe it off with a rag.
no, nothing. It don't absorb
it's
on
like
you.
napalm with not on fire.
But the problem is it can be really thick, and so you picture your impeller and everything trying to turn in that. And so that's going to create a situation where cavitation is going to be more prominent. So having too much coolant can be as detrimental as not having enough. So most all manufacturers that I'm aware of recommend a 50-50 mix of whatever coolant they specify. If there's one out there that doesn't, I'm not aware of it.
Too high of a coolant ratio.
Too high of a coolant ratio, yes.
Not too much coolant. You can never
Yeah, that's right. Not too much coolant. Yeah, Zach, that's your problem. You get too much coolant in the car. Well, you might have too much in the trunk. I mean, dude, 4 gallons is enough. We don't need any more than that.
That's kind of
Need another 2.
So talking about heat exchangers, I thought this was very interesting.
I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Little tin ring.
Fun fact, the Bugatti Veyron uses 10 radiators, 3 for the engine, 1 for the liquid-to-air intercoolers, 2 for the air conditioning, 1 for the transmission, 1 for engine oil, and 1 for the differential, and 1 for the rear wing. Now that wing is putting in work if you got to cool the fluid that raises and lowers the rear wing. But we're talking about heat exchangers next, and I just thought this was a really cool cool fact. There's 10 of them on this particular car.
This is a freaking awesome car.
That don't matter. Super still will whoop it.
No.
In what way?
I was told when they were filming the car for the commercial, Supra was actually gone before it was faster than.
I mean, yeah, if the Bugatti's doing 80, the Supra's doing 85. I'm sure.
Well, that's true. That is true.
But I mean, it's not. It's never, ever going to be a Bugatti.
That's true. My Volvo would be the Bugatti actually if
yeah.
it were doing
I could-
64 and I
if
was
he's
doing
doing 30.
69. Yeah.
I mean, it would be
No.
a struggle, but I can pass it.
No, again, this is one of those cars that I like supercars. I really do. You know, there's a bunch of them that I think are really cool. This one never really grabbed me. I think it's ugly. I think it's big. I don't think that it's not a track weapon. It's kind of too big for that. It's too powerful to really be a GT car, but it's an exercise in engineering. It's what's possible. And so I do applaud them for that. They did a great job with the engineering in this car. Never been in one, obviously. But from everything you can tell, it's extremely luxurious on the inside. It rides good. It drives good. It's one of those cars, you know, your grandma could ride to Walmart and then you could rip off a 250 mile an hour pass. So in the engineering part of it, I really do respect what they did. I still think it's a big ugly bug, but whatever.
I only like it in
That's just
these
me.
colors. Any other colors, I don't like it.
Those colors are.
But yeah, like I said,
It's what like the anniversary edition colors.
you know, supercar stuff, man, you know, Lotus Evora, GT2 RS, you know, track weapon cars, you know, I think are kind of where it's at. I don't know if a GT2 RS would be considered a supercar or what, but anyway, I'm about it. Yeah, track car. Lotus Evora, anybody wants to donate a Lotus to the cause, I'm just saying. I know, I saw it.
It's gone.
Yeah.
So is that McLaren, I think.
Yeah.
They still have a Porsche out there.
McLaren's that's a good example too. That's a good example of a supercar that's a track weapon.
Senna.
Yeah. So, cool down quickly. So this is our third tie-in for tonight. Trust in God. So we talked about don't overheat. We talked about you know, being slow to anger and all of that. We talked about you know, the importance of coolant, being out with the good or out with the bad and in with good. Yeah, don't mix those two up. But we want to talk about cooling down quickly because, as we all know, you can have the best intentions, you could have, all of that, but we're going to get heated, right? I mean, same thing with our cars.
You can have the nicest BMW.
You can have the nicest everything, the best coolant, fresh, new water pump, all that, and you can still overheat that thing. So when it does happen, we need to cool down quickly. And I use this picture because this is an example of radiator being taken very, very seriously. That is a giant big block, looks like a big block Chevrolet, I'm guessing by the valve covers. But the radiator is like twice the size of the engine. I mean, this thing is serious. And I like this because you can see, I don't know if that's engine oil or transmission, but one of those is probably engine oil, one of these is probably transmission cooler, and the giant radiator right there. So this guy is taking cooling very, very seriously. So I thought that was a really cool picture. Yeah, slicks, yeah. Total drag car.
Really skinny.
Yeah,
dumps.
yeah.
Oh yeah, Mickey dumps.
You got fender well dumps, yeah, definitely drag car. But he's taking cooling very, very seriously. So, yeah. So we're talking about cooling down. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord." So again, this is one of those ones that kind of speaks to you, at least it does for me, because, everybody likes to get angry. Well, they might not like to, but we all do it. And then what do you do when you get angry? You want revenge, right? You want to set it straight. You want justice. You wronged me. I'm going to get you. And that is 100% the wrong attitude. Again, this is one of those things where I don't think being angry and you act on it, does God go, yeah, I like that. That's what I would do. yeah, keep doing that. No, I don't, again, I can't speak for him, but I'm pretty sure that's not what's going on.
Well, it's written in the Bible, do not act in anger.
Exactly. And right here it says, do not take revenge, but leave room for God's wrath. And I really like that wording because it's saying, well, if you take revenge, there's no room for God's wrath. There's no room for God to involve if you do it. Yeah. If you really want revenge on that guy, you want God to do it. So the best thing to do is live at peace with everyone. I mean, honestly, that's, how could you not argue with that? But leave room for God's wrath. I like that. So next time I'm aggravated in traffic or something, I'm going to be like, I'm backing up. Why are you backing up? I'm leaving room for God's wrath. Yeah, it's kind of a karmic action, I guess, here. But no, I really do like that. It is written, it is mine to avenge, and I will repay. That only thing that makes me nervous about this verse is anybody that's wishing revenge upon me right now. I don't want to be on the receiving end of this. Yeah, I don't want to be on the receiving end of this. So think about that, when you get angry or when you're doing something that somebody may have to repay you for one day. Yeah, you might, they didn't get revenge on you, and you might be like, ha, I got away with it. But they may just be really leaving room for God's wrath. So think about that if you're not living in peace with everyone. So how do we control this temperature? I included this in here. This isn't a class on thermostats or anything, but this is an extremely important part of the cooling system. What we've talked about so far is really kind of basic. It's coolant, it's heat exchangers. There's some more heat exchanger stuff in here too. These next few slides are things that really didn't fit in any of those categories, but are very important to the cooling system. Temperature control. We need to control the temperature. Contrary to popular belief, we want to keep that engine at an optimal temperature. Not as cold as possible, and obviously not overheating. We don't want all the components and the oil and everything to be breaking down because of over temperature conditions. There is an optimal temperature. Now, everyone's going to be a little bit different, but usually between 180 and 220 degrees is about where gasoline engines like to be. When I worked for Chevrolet, we used to have people bring Corvettes back all the time. They'd be brand new, have like 1,300 miles on them. This thing's running hot. It's running hot. It's not running hot. The fans don't even come on until 218, but they got out of something that they would look at the little gauge on the thing and it would be like 175 or 180, and you can't trust those anyway because they're designed to be middle from a range of like 155 to like 225. And then anything below or over that, they're all hot or all cold. So yeah, you can't believe those.
Be a light that says hot or cold.
Well, and they used to have those on cars. They called them idiot lights. And they called them that for a reason because it was, hey idiot, you're overheating. At least the gauge gives you a little bit of warning that hey, we're getting hot. Okay, now we're hot. The light was just, we're hot. Shut it down. And then you get into like a X5 or something, and the whole thing like screams at you, bling, overheat conditions, reduce power and all this. But anyway,
It's got an arm that reaches out, punches you in the face until you shut it off. Cool down.
that is one thing. That is one thing about or at least the BMW I had, the 335. It was super funny. No, but it gave you the same warning if the wiper fluid was low, there was ice possible outside, your seatbelt wasn't fastened, or the engine was overheating and wanted you to shut it down right now. It was the same sound. Yeah. Or the wiper fluid's a little low.
Proceeding further
Yeah.
could cause you detrimental engine damage, or you should buckle up.
Yeah, and it freaked me out too because, if you were driving along and, the temperature was low, you'd drive along to a section where it's like 32 degrees and then bling, you get that noise, and totally scare you to death. But thermostats are important, and the reason is because thermostats maintain that temperature. This is where that temperature is maintained, the thermostat setting. So how does this thing work? It's a relatively simple device that's still in use today. This was designed a very long time ago. But we've got coolant on the engine side of the thermostat. Again, I apologize. I got a cord in my way. I can't walk over there. But we've got coolant at the bottom of it. We've got this wax pellet. That's this brass part that you see right here. There's actually a wax pellet inside of this thing. I don't know if I have. Okay, I don't. But there's actually a wax pellet that melts at a very specific temperature inside of this. And when it melts, it allows this spring to actually act on this valve, and it opens up and allows coolant to flow out of the engine and out to the radiators. That's a super simple design that is still in use. I have no idea who invented it or when it was invented, but that's still how they do it today. Typically, these fail one of two ways. They fail shut, so they never open, and coolant just keeps bypassing inside of the engine block until it ultimately gets overheated and you get a message or a warning or a blown head gasket. Or they fail open, where coolant is allowed to flow through out to the radiators at all times. The downside of that is the engine never comes up to temperature. The coolant's being pumped through the radiators all the time as the engine's trying to warm up, and so the engine actually never comes up to temperature. And they need to be at a specific temperature for a couple of reasons. We need the oil to be up to temperature. We need the cylinder block and the cylinder heads and the pistons to be up to temperature, because these are all designed to operate at certain tolerances, and the metal and the aluminum and everything inside of them are designed to grow and swell and come together at specific temperatures. That's why you don't want to just fire your car up dead cold and stand on it to redline. All right, that's not good. The oil's cold. All the clearances are whacked out. That's just a bad deal. I mean, you always want to let it warm up. You always want to bring the block and everything, especially if you're going to do any hard driving, race car driving, performance, or anything like that. You would never do that on a cold engine. Well, if the thermostat's stuck open, you end up with that situation where the engine actually never comes up to temperature. Also, fuel economy, is another big one we need. If it stays cold all the time, it's going to stay rich all the time. You're going to be using more fuel than you normally need to. So it is a fuel economy thing and a power thing as well. So yes, we want to keep these engines cool, but we don't want them to be ice cold all of the time. All right. I'm going to stop it right here. I've got a few slides on heat exchangers, but we don't have to get into that tonight. Like I said, I made extra ones. I made like 28. That's why I was saying these ones right here didn't really fit into a specific, sorry, I messed that all up, specific category. But, I didn't know how long this was going to go and how many people were going to show up and how many questions we were going to have. So I always try to make sure I got a few extra. Do we have any questions? Any questions out there online? Gary, Rich, anybody? You guys still watching?
I got a question. So do you get like what they call them, crap boxes in every day?
Yes, every single day.
Have you ever been to his shop?
Every single day. That's all we work on. Yes, yes.
You may get like one nice one every 6 months.
Yeah.
Even then, if I hit my handles, it's still
Yeah, I was gonna say even then, yeah.
You can get a
The way
Pagani
they fix
Zonda
them
R in
problems,
there.
they just kick the engine or something. And they
Yeah,
call it.
and we do a really good job of we kind of do a pretty good job of picking and choosing. Also, you don't want to take a car like that in. Usually we'll send them down the road. They're not for us. But I do want to say, let me know what you guys think of this idea. I want to do like an interview type class where we have somebody that I can interview. Now, may not be in person, may have to be online, but somebody like Rich, Jerry Hoffman, David Younger, somebody that's a car guy but also loves God, I would love to do like an interview deal. So if you guys know anybody or if you'd be interested in doing that, I'd love to have you on, talk about your car deal, talk about your how you came to Christ, that kind of thing. So if you'd be willing to do that on camera, I would love to hear from you. So definitely hit me up either here on Facebook or send me an email or whatever the case is. But until we meet again, guys, let's go ahead and pray and get out of here. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again. We so much appreciate this time that we have together. Father, I pray you bless this time. I pray you be with each and every family represented here and each and every one that may see this anytime, Father. We just pray that you would bless each and every one of us with your patience and your love and help us to follow your example. We do this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Appreciate it. We